War has always been hell, but until 1915, it was a hell you could see. You could see the enemy. You could see the bullet. You could see the sword. But in the second year of the Great War, humanity unlocked a new door to darkness. They invented a weapon that was silent, invisible, and inescapable. Before we walk the blood-soaked grounds of Osowiec Fortress, we must understand the monster that attacked it. The year was 1915. The war on the Western Front had stalled. The trenches stretched like an open wound from the Swiss border to the North Sea. Neither side could move. The generals were desperate. They needed a way to kill men who were hiding deep underground, protected by concrete and earth. Enter Fritz Haber, a brilliant scientist, a Nobel Prize winner, and the man who would become known as the father of chemical warfare. He proposed a terrifying solution to the German High Command. He didn't suggest a bigger gun or a faster plane. He suggested poison. He proposed releasing chlorine gas from cylinders, letting the wind carry it into the enemy trenches. It would be a weapon that didn't distinguish between a general and a private. It would simply consume everything that breathed. The first true test of this horror came at the Second Battle of Ypres in April 1915. It was a beautiful spring afternoon. French and Canadian troops looked out across the no-man's land and saw something strange. A yellow-green cloud was drifting towards them on the gentle breeze. They didn't panic at first. They thought it was a smokescreen to hide an infantry charge. They were wrong. As the cloud engulfed them, thousands of men began to claw at their throats. They fell to the ground, drowning on dry land. The gas reacted with the water in their lungs to form acid. It was a massacre. The world was horrified. The newspapers called it the devil's breath. But the German High Command saw only one thing: effectiveness. And so they looked east toward the Russian Empire and prepared to unleash this hell on an even larger scale. This brings us to August 6, 1915, Osowiec Fortress in modern-day Poland. For months, the German forces had laid siege to this Russian stronghold. They had fired thousands of artillery shells. They had launched infantry charges, but the Russians refused to surrender. The fortress was a thorn in the side of the German advance. So, the order was given to use the new weapon. At 4 a.m., the wind shifted favorably. The German field marshal gave the signal. 30 gas balloon batteries opened their valves simultaneously. A dark green cloud of chlorine and bromine began to drift toward the Russian lines. It was a silent wave, moving slowly, inevitably. This mixture was far deadlier than what was used at Ypres. As the gas hit the fortress, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The environment itself began to die. The grass turned black, the leaves curled up and fell from the trees. Even the copper on the soldiers' guns began to corrode, turning a sickly green. The Russian defenders were doomed. They had no advanced gas masks. Their protection was primitive, undershirts soaked in water or urine wrapped tightly around their faces. It was a desperate attempt to filter out the poison. For most, it was not enough. By mid-morning, the shelling stopped. The gas had done its work. Intelligence reports suggested that no living thing could remain inside the fortress. Silence fell over Osowiec. To the German commanders, the battle was already won. The fortress was no longer a military target. It was a graveyard. 7,000 soldiers of the 14th Landwehr Division began their advance. They marched with rifles lowered, confident, expecting to walk over the bodies of the fallen and secure the position. They were not prepared for a fight. They were prepared for a cleanup operation. As the Germans crossed the first line of defense, the fog began to clear slightly. The shapes of the trenches came into view. Then a sound broke the silence. A cough, then a shout. From the chemical haze, figures began to rise. They did not look like soldiers anymore. These were the remnants of the 13th Company of the 226th Zemlyansky Regiment. roughly 60 men. They had survived a dose of poison that should have killed them instantly. Their appearance was terrifying. Chemical burns had darkened their skin. They were wrapped in bloody rags to cover their wounds. They could barely breathe, spitting up blood with every step. But they were standing, and they were charging. It was a sight that defied all logic. In the minds of the advancing German troops, these weren't men. They were ghosts. Panic is a powerful weapon. When the 7,000 advancing troops saw the dead men charging at them with bayonets, logic collapsed. Primal fear took over. They didn't see 60 weakened men. They saw an army rising from the grave to drag them down. The German line didn't break. It shattered. Thousands of soldiers turned and fled. In their blind terror, they trampled their own comrades and became entangled in their own barbed wire defenses. The 60 dead men, with their last ounces of strength, opened fire with the few remaining cannons. The psychological blow was absolute. A handful of dying men had routed an entire division simply by refusing to die. The Russians held the fortress that day, but the victory was symbolic. The survivors, having expended their final life force in that charge, succumbed to the gas shortly after. The fortress was evacuated and demolished weeks later. The attack of the dead men was a miracle, but it was also a warning. After Osowiec, the war changed forever. Both sides realized that the air itself had become an enemy. The simple cloth masks used by the Russians were no longer enough. This led to a terrifying evolution in gear. Soldiers began to look less like men and more like monsters. The British developed the hypo helmet, a bag soaked in chemicals with murky eyepieces. The Germans developed rubber masks that looked like skulls. But the most terrifying sight was the gas masks for animals. Horses, dogs, and even carrier pigeons were fitted with protective gear. A cavalry charge in 1916 looked less like a military maneuver and more like a stampede of faceless beasts from a nightmare. But the horror didn't stop at chlorine. By 1917, a new gas appeared: mustard gas. Unlike chlorine, you didn't need to breathe it. If it touched your skin, it burned. If it touched your eyes, you went blind. It could settle in the mud of the trenches and remain deadly for weeks. Soldiers would sleep in the mud only to wake up covered in blisters. The legacy of the dead men at Osowiec is not just about bravery. It is a reminder of how quickly humanity can descend into madness. In just 4 years, we went from charging with horses to melting lungs with chemistry. And yet, amidst the green fog and the burning skin, the human will to survive proved to be the strongest weapon of all. This has been Trench Tales. We are dedicated to uncovering the forgotten history of the Great War. If this story moved you, please subscribe and join us in the trenches. New videos are coming soon.